Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. I am Carla Richards. I am the Director of Planning at ABCD. I'll be your moderator for this evening. We have a great lineup of speakers and hope that you would comment and ask questions. So we set aside time at the end of the event, at the end of the panel discussion, for you to ask questions. You can either raise your hand or put it directly in the chat. So this is our 2021, ABCD's 2021 Black History Month celebration. It's an annual event. The first thing I want to do is just thank the planning committee who gave graciously of their time and their talents to make the event happen. Thank you, committee members. As many of you know, this past year, this last December, we lost a key member of the ABCD family. Irving has been a part of the fabric at ABCD for almost 30 years. She's an innovator, a mentor, an educator, an advocate, and so much more. And so this year's event, this year's program, this program is in honor of her commitment to community health and wellness. And it aligns very well because there's also a national theme each year for Black History Month. And this year's theme is the Black family, which is, it's a perfect alignment. And so this program is going to reflect on her work and offer discussion on some of the issues that were near and dear to her in keeping with the theme of the Black family. So to kick off our program, I'd like to introduce our Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer, Sharon Scott Chandler. Sharon?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my honor to welcome you again to ABCD's Black History Month celebration. It's an annual event that brings together ABCD family and folks in the community to reflect on the important contributions, experience, and issues centered around Black folks and the community as well. I bring greetings from our President and CEO, John Drew, and on behalf of ABCD, thank you all for joining us. I also want to thank our esteemed guest speakers who you'll hear from this afternoon, Representative Liz Miranda, City Councilor Julia Mejia, and Georgia Simpson, and Bria Gadsden. You are all in for a really informative, passionate, and insightful discussion around the issues that we're facing. For those of you who have joined us before, you know that we often reflect and call out those who have made history, Black history, in the past, as well as those who are doing so in the present and in the future. And I think, as Carla mentioned, one person that we can say has had it all and has that impact on all of us was Irving. She was an incredible woman, and she truly made history with her contributions to community health, to overall community reproductive health, young women's lives. And she inspires us in the present. And as Carla said, is one of the reasons, the many reasons why we decided to have a theme that really honored her work and the work that we will continue to do in her spirit for eternity. I think none of us will ever forget 2020. COVID-19 and access to treatment that continues to disproportionately impact the Black community and other people of color every day through the loss of income and health and livelihood, and reflecting on this past year as well. Obviously the police murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and historically so many others. That catalyzed a reckoning throughout the nation and really galvanized us all as a broad-based movement for racial justice and equity. ABCD, for those of you who don't know, is answering that call. We've answered the call for 60 years, the history of community action rooted in racial and social and economic justice. And while our work has always been rooted in that cause and as well the conditions of poverty, we've renewed that commitment through a formal statement to ensure clarity and purpose of action. And poignantly so, Irving gave us the language that we center the power and voice of people who have struggled to get a seat at the table. And so it's only fitting that our commitment to racial equity informs everything that we do. We also recognize June 19th as an official organizational holiday, and we've established a working group to develop and implement a process that will give more intentionality and allow us to reflect not only in the 60-year commitment, but what that commitment means in the context of today's world and today's environment. We appreciate your being here today at ABCD Celebration as we keep the focus on Black history, Black excellence, and Black challenge, as we know there are many.
I'd like to introduce you, and I'd like to bring on board at this point a former mentee of Irving, one of her dearest friends, Councilor Mejia, who is a champion for education and immigration and civic engagement and so much more. So please join us at this time for some keynote remarks from Boston City Councilor at Large, Mejia.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be here, and I am grateful to have the opportunity to talk about my dear friend, Irving, and why it's so important for us to recognize the celebration of the Black family, of Black love, of Black joy, and all the things that Irving did in this community. For those who were fortunate enough to get a hug from Irving, you know that those hugs left you feeling like you could do anything, right? Let's continue to recognize how important it is for us to create space for other people to step into their power, which is one of the things that Irving has done for so many young women and men here in the city of Boston and beyond. It is her generous spirit that continues to guide us. I also want you all to recognize how incredible it is an opportunity to celebrate someone who has given so much. I think that there are many of us here in this room that know that the work that Irving has done with us has created so many other leaders. So I'm just incredibly grateful for the opportunity to be here alongside you all. I'm incredibly grateful to ABCD. I'm a recipient of ABCD. I would not be here had it not been for your support. So I just wanted to say thank you so very much for giving me the opportunity to be here to celebrate the Queen of Community. And looking forward to hearing from our amazing panel of all things that deal with uplifting Black love, Black families, and Black joy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. We have this leads us right into our panel discussion. It's a relevant discussion about Black family and health equity and reproductive health. We are very fortunate to be joined by two women who are experts in their own field. And each person has a special connection to Irving. So first up is Representative Liz Miranda, that represents the 5th Suffolk District and is a leader on so many fronts in terms of police reform, economic justice, health equity, social entrepreneur. And our social entrepreneur, who is our other panelist, Bria Gadsden, who is the co-founder and executive director of Love Your Menses, which is an organization that works to provide a platform for girls and young women of color to become more aware of their bodies as they transition from pre-puberty to puberty. And to top it off, we have today's panel is being facilitated by Georgia Simpson, who is the Regional Minority Health Analyst at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services for Region Number 1, and who's also a great friend of Irving's. Reminder again that we've tried to set aside some time at the end. We hope to be able to take some questions. So for now, your mics will be muted and you may be off camera. and we'll take questions at the end. So with that, Georgia, take it away.
Thank you for the introduction, Carla, and Councilor Mejia for your reflections. I am truly honored to be a facilitator for this year's ABCD Black History Month celebration. You know, health happens in community, and Irving's heart and soul was in the community. I remember all the energy and enthusiasm she brought to her work. Someone recently asked me, how did I know her? And so I started with, reflecting on, how I communicated with her just recently on World AIDS Day and asking her for some help in identifying activities that were happening in the community so that I could hopefully share it much, much more broadly. And then I started thinking about, and the number of times we collaborated on National Women and Girls HIV/AIDS Awareness Day and the wonderful celebrations. And the more I reflected on our interactions and our collaborations, the more numerous the years became. She was always there. I couldn't even count how many times I've bumped into her just randomly at other events. But one thing I can share with you, each and every time, whether it was 6 months ago or a year ago, it was like it was yesterday that we had just spoken or emailed. And the one thing that rests with me every time I think about Irving is that wonderful, wonderful smile and her laughter. So that will always be part of, I know, all of our memories. Just want to take a brief moment to share a little bit about the work in the office that I work in, which is the Region 1 Office of the Regional Health Operations. That sits in the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Health, also known as OASH in Health and Human Services. So the regional office is led by Betsy Rosenfeld and includes my colleague, Natalia Guevara, the Senior Public Health Analyst. Addressing health inequities has been a long-standing commitment of OASH, and more specifically of its Office of Minority Health, whose priorities I work to promote in the 6 New England states. Recently, the Biden administration issued an executive order on advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government, so that across the federal government, we can create opportunities for the improvement of communities that have historically been underserved, and that benefits everyone. This year, during Black History Month, the HHS Office of Minority Health focus has been on highlighting the impacts of COVID-19 on African Americans with underlying health issues such as uncontrolled hypertension. And within New England, we are working across the region with our Region 1 federal agencies and the states and communities to ensure equitable COVID-19 vaccine distribution, as well as administration, making certain that our communities are being vaccinated adequately, appropriately, and sufficiently covered. So a number of very interesting and important efforts are underway to make certain that happens. There was also the prioritization in the region of sickle cell disease and how to increase providers' use of effective treatments for people living with sickle cell disease. The regional office also supports the New England Community Health Worker Coalition, and I heard one of the speakers, and I believe also Councilor Mejia, reflecting on work as a community health worker, an integral workforce and experts in the knowledge of community norms and values, and how that is just essential to us being able to really do good work to address the health and social needs of communities of color. So we are here to celebrate and honor Irving and have questions and discussions centered on the next steps in the work around community health that she was committed to. And so I'd like to invite the panel to offer reflections on Irving. Let's see. Representative Miranda.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today is both a joyous and I think for many of us a solemn occasion as we're uplifting one of our own. But for me, also remembering what a tremendous loss our city and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has actually gone through. I speak for many people and echo many of the sentiments shared today about how Irving not only exuded trying to keep us healthy and safer and happier, but also about exuding love and family. I joke often with people that I have been an elected official for 26 months, but I've been a Black woman from Roxbury my entire life. And walking into the space of government was not something I was actually accustomed to. I actually ran for office 6 months after the murder of my youngest brother, Michael, and hadn't really realized that part of my community organizing work as an executive director, work as a youth worker, and my first job through ABCD as a sexual health educator at Orchard Park Teen Center that Irving reminded me of was all part of this work of that we can't ignore the health of our community because it actually is the center of all things. Currently, we're going through multiple pandemics at once. And, the thing that I remember the most about Irving, we were actually friends. We shared lots of sips of wines and Ubers. We talked a lot about engaging our colleagues in youth work and health. And she really inspired me, her and other colleagues, to focus on health equity. When I ran for office, she was always deeply supportive. And I used to ask her how she actually got to all the events that she got to, because many of those events were scheduled for me and I had to show up. But Irving was there just to show community love and support, and always reminding us to center women and girls and to center our bodies and ourselves and not to be shameful. I grew up in an immigrant Black family, and I felt like the word sex was taboo, and thinking about what my vagina looked like. I mean, I'm saying that today, but like the idea of talking about maternal care or talking about reproductive rights was not something that you talked about at the dinner table. And because of that, our communities are suffering. Bowdoin, Geneva, which is in my district, has some of the highest rates of STDs. And I talked often with Irving and even Bria, who is my esteemed co-panelist, about what that means. So I'm here today to really say we must carry Irving's torch forward. All of the things that she taught us individually and collectively have to be centered in the work that we do, because it's not just about what we do, it's how we do it. And I am just incredibly thankful that I met her and that I was able to bask in her light. She radiated when she walked into any room, and you knew who she was. And so I'm incredibly happy that I'm here today to celebrate with you all and just share a little bit about how she's actually inspired a lot of my work. And I make a commitment as a legislator, whether it's a day in the Commonwealth for Irving or a bill in her name, or trying to change policy, or adding money to organizations like ABCD that carry on her legacy, I'm making a commitment to make sure that I do that in her honor and her spirit.
Bria Gadsen, would you like to share some reflections?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. And hello, Rep. Miranda, my shero. It's such a pleasure to speak with you on this panel. My name is Bria Gadsden. I am a Boston native, born and raised in Mattapan. I met Irving a few years ago, and when I think about Irving, I think about home. No matter where I was or what I was doing, every time I was around Irving or emailing her or texting her, it always felt like home. She was just so warm-spirited, and her energy was just so positive that no matter what I was going through in my life, I know that Irving was always there and I could always count on her. And Irving also helped me appreciate the little girl inside of me, the little Bria who wanted to have a mentor when I was 12 years old, who wanted to learn more about her body and about menstruation and puberty, who wanted to be active in the community and have a support system of Black women. And so Irving was all of that for me. She was my mentor, she was my friend, she was my sister, and I miss her dearly. And it's really tough talking about her because I feel like I haven't came to the reality that she's no longer here with us physically, but her spirit and her legacy will continue to live on. And a lot of the work I did with Irving was really around working with Black girls and teaching them about puberty and about their periods specifically, and learning how to understand, embrace, and love their flows, their menstrual flows, that is. And Irving inspired me and was the one who helped me create our first Love Your Menses event at the Thelma D. Burns building in Roxbury in 2019. And I remember just telling Irving, I want to host a period party for Black and brown girls in Roxbury. And she's like, okay, let's make it happen. We'll pay for the food. We have the venue. Now you have to just find the speakers. And Irving was just that type of person. She would bring your ideas to light, but she would still make you do the work, and she would hold you accountable. And she helped groom me to be this amazing community leader, because although I was born and raised in Boston, I did not like Boston. I'll be honest, I wanted to move and go somewhere else. And Irving was always like, no, stay here. This is your community. We love you. We're here to support you. And so I give all thanks to Irving for that, because she really made me love my city and love my people and love my community. And so everything that we've done together was centered around supporting our girls and having them love their bodies and supporting their parents as well in regard to their own reproductive health issues. And so she will be dearly missed. And the girls all the way from here to Africa loved Irving. We would host Love Your Menses workshops in Nigeria, and the girls would be like, who's Irving? And Irving would talk to the girls in Abuja. And so she just had an impact worldwide. And the girls miss her, but we're going to continue her legacy. And this year, we're going to be Irving. She is our queen. She is our light. And everything I do is through her. And so thank you for having me here. And I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you both for your memories of Irving and commitment to continuing her work, which is tremendous. And so, what I'd like to ask, I have a few questions for each of you, just so the audience knows. We have amazing panelists with us who, as you've heard, are doing amazing things. So for Representative Miranda, you issued, forgive me as I reach over for my papers, an act to reduce racial disparities in maternal health. So can you share with us what was the driving force behind the legislation that you sponsored around maternal health disparities and communities of color?
Absolutely. I couldn't name the experiences that I had faced as a young girl, or even those of my friends and family when I first walked into the State House. But in my first week as one of only 3 Black women in the entire Massachusetts legislature, out of 200 senators and representatives, I received a presentation from the March of Dimes. And there around the table sat every freshman legislator woman. And here was this white-led organization at the time. I'm happy to say they have a new national CEO that is also a Black woman who's also a member of Delta Sigma Theta like me. So I'm incredibly delighted about what's going to happen with March of Dimes. But a white-led organization telling me in my first week here that Black women were dying at alarming rates, not only around the country at 4 to 8 times the rate of white women before and during and after childbirth, but here in Massachusetts, the bastion of bio and life sciences, the best medical institutions in the world, the best colleges in the world, and arguably the best public health system. We were dying, and we were dying in Roxbury and Dorchester. We were dying in Bristol County. We were dying in Worcester County. And every zip code that was listed. There were 10 zip codes and 5 actually out of the 10 were in my district. And I got up from that table very weak and I said, Liz, you're a Black woman. You don't know anything about this right now, but you cannot walk out this room without committing that you're going to do something about this. I have no children, and part of the energy that I felt walking out that door was that I didn't want to die. I don't want to die giving birth. I don't want to watch my friends or my family be hurt. And in that moment, I remembered that my sister had given birth to a child that was 20 weeks old and she didn't survive, and I watched her give birth. I remembered that my best friend had to hire a doula and pay lots of money in her last month of her birthing journey because her partner was not there. I remembered my friend Jay Simone, who after 2 weeks of giving birth complained about pain in her stomach, and they didn't believe her. They had sent her home. And when she finally went to the hospital, they realized that they had left a piece of apparatus in her and had cut a piece of her intestines. And the reason why I'm sharing all of this is because Black women are dying not because we're not getting educated enough or we're not living in community enough. It's because of structural racism and just not listening to Black women. And so I filed a bill with Representative Kay Khan and Senator Becca Rausch to start a maternal inequity commission. And I'm just happy to say that as a first-year representative was able to pass that bill unanimously in the Massachusetts House so that we could have a commission centered and led by Black women. There is nothing in Massachusetts that is centered and led by Black women to say, you know, you guys have had 401 years to figure some of this stuff out and we're still dying. So now we're gonna take control. We've been trying to take control this whole time, but we move out the way kindly, and let us bring our doctors, our public health, our nurse practitioners, our doulas, our grandmothers, our women who are and birthing partners who have suffered through tremendous loss. And so part of that energy is very deeply personal. And I think that that is the gift that Black women give to everything, whether it's voting, whether we're talking about food insecurity or reproductive health. We're talking about us. And so because we're talking about us, we come with that passion. And I'm happy to announce that I've also partnered with a lot of legislators to make health equity and racial justice a priority in Massachusetts. Many of you know that the COVID response and the vaccine response essentially did what most bills do, right? When you live in a structurally racist environment like the government is, that basically ignored the communities that suffered the most. And so we said, hell no. We wrote a bill on vaccine equity. Many of the new ideas that you see coming out of the executive branch now came from that bill. And so we can do something about everything. And I think the moment is now. And so I just thank you for asking me that question. Even though I didn't have children yet, I knew that when we're talking about abortion, when we're talking about reproductive access, when we're talking about maternal care, we're talking about us. And if we work on focusing on improving the quality of life and experiences for Black and Brown, BIPOC women, people who are immigrant and living in low-income communities, we actually help everybody. And that's the goal. The goal is that no person going through a birthing journey, whether it is before, during, or after, will succumb to their injuries, particularly in the best hospitals in the world.
Thank you so much, so much for that. You remind your comments, your sentiments, your experience reminds me of something that I learned in doing some maternal and child health work. And it's that the health of a nation is dependent upon the health of its mothers. And so that's what's resonating at this moment, and it's so true. So, Ms. Bria Gadsen, I also have questions for you. So what was the driving force behind your launch of Love Your Menses Incorporated?
Yes. So growing up, no one ever talked to me about my period. I remember being at camp one day at the sportsman tennis camp, and this boy said, "Hey, you have some red stuff on the back of your pants," and I was wearing white pants, so very obvious. So I went home, and then all of a sudden the pain hit, and I was in intense pain. I looked at my underwear and just realized I got my period for the first time. And my grandmother gave me some Midol, gave me a pad, told me to lay down, and that was it. And from that moment on, I experienced the worst menstrual pain every month, even now. And I've had to miss countless days of school and work because of my dysmenorrhea. And I just felt like there was no one supporting me. Every time I would go see a doctor, the first thing they would do was prescribe birth control. And then I would always say to them, no, what are my other options? I want to get down to the root cause of the problem instead of putting a Band-Aid over a wound. So I know I experienced debilitating pain, but why? Do I need to change my diet? Do I need to be more physically active? Is it my stress levels? And so over time, I had to understand my body. I had to specifically understand my womb health. And it took a lot of trial and error, and I had to be vulnerable. So I remember being in college and speaking with my friends one day, and one of my friends asked this crazy question, "Bria, do you poop a lot on your period?" And at first I was like, why is she asking me this? And then I was like, actually, I do. And from that moment on, my friends and I, we started having these honest conversations about our bodies in ways that I've never done before. And from that, it helped me really understand myself, understand my cycle. And now I'm so in tune with my menstrual cycle. I know when I'm ovulating. I know what I need to do during ovulation to stop the pain. I know what herbs I need to take, or I know when I need to go see my OBGYN in order to keep up with my appointments. But I had to really take control of my reproductive health and advocate for not only myself, but from my friends and from my family members. And so I was like, this would be so great for adolescents to have someone talk to them about the menstrual cycle even before they get their first period. Because one thing we're starting to notice in research studies is that girls are undergoing puberty at earlier ages than their mothers and their grandmothers. And that's due to environmental toxins, thinking about the foods that we eat, the hair care products and other beauty products that we use, and the endocrine disrupting chemicals in these products, which are specifically targeted towards the Black community. And it's affecting our reproductive health in ways that we've never seen before. And so with Love Your Menses, we provide menstrual education for Black girls, and we talk to them about puberty and what to expect. We give them period kits, and so they always have a pad with them and wipes, and they have a notebook so they can write down what they're experiencing each month. And so when they see their doctor, instead of having to remember, oh, was I in pain or was my sleep pattern different, they have it written down. And so we're really empowering our young people to understand their flows and to embrace them and to love them. And although I may not love my menstrual cramps, I love myself and I love my body enough to continue advocating for not only my reproductive health, but the reproductive health of the 12-year-old in Mattapan or Roxbury or Dorchester.
Bria, that's amazing work. No, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing it. Thank you for engaging others. It's actually very empowering to hear you speak and to hear how you're approaching loving yourself and your body and your full being. That's really important. So we'd like to engage the audience. And as Carla mentioned, we have set aside just a little bit of time now for a brief Q&A session. So please feel free to, let's see, I can't see my full screen, but you may have a raise your hand feature or submit questions in the chat, and we will do our very best to answer your questions in real time. So are there any questions from the audience? I do have one, and this is for both of you to answer. COVID has had devastating impacts on Black and Latinx communities. Can you talk a bit, just a little bit, about some of the challenges and the implications for this work that you've begun? How is COVID impacting your work?
I think what the most important thing that we can learn from COVID, it was both a virus that devastated our communities, but also a blessing in a way that it was able to unearth many things that our communities had been saying for a long time. And that was that our communities were unjustly polluted. Our communities didn't have the right type of housing, the right type of food, and all these things were man-made, right? They were done by policy, and they would only get undone by having better policy or eradicating the policies that exist. And so for me, immediately when COVID hit, I realized that my community, which dies 30 years before the Back Bay, needed some resources. And so we began doing work a little differently. I went back to my community organizing days. And, you know, I look at Bria and I look at when someone is mentored well, when someone is loved well, the impact that they can make in the world is grand. You can't even put a number to it. And so I remembered how I was taught to do community organizing work, called 3,000 seniors, got to get food to the community, and now have been working a lot on vaccine equity. Language access is one of the major issues that we're facing. Massachusetts speaks hundreds of languages, yet the unemployment site, the DTA site, the RAF site, all the sites that we need to get help from do not speak the languages that we need our communities to hear from. And also digital literacy. Huge issues and something that we worked on for decades, that there's still a big digital divide. And so I've been working on those three things pretty closely since COVID happened. And I'm in community more. I get to be at home more, and which has actually been great, that I don't have to go to Beacon Hill. I can actually walk the streets of my community and see people who need help every day.
Excellent, thank you. Bria?
Yeah, so at the beginning of the pandemic, one thing I realized was that a lot of students specifically was experiencing lack of access to period products. And in fact, Always came out with a survey, and 1 out of 3 parents reported feeling worried about being unable to afford period products. And so one thing we started doing was distributing period care packages in the Boston community. And we've been doing that since then. And we've also started distributing postpartum care packages, because periods don't stop for pandemics and pregnancies don't stop for pandemics. And so how can we support the menstrual health and the postpartum needs of women and girls and people who menstruate in the community? And then oftentimes when people think about period poverty, they always focus on the homeless community. However, students experience period poverty as well. And in fact, Mass Now, they conducted a survey in 2019, and 56% of Massachusetts school nurses reported observing students missing days of class due to lack of access to period products. And so if a student relies on a school nurse for products, but now they're experiencing remote learning, and so they're not in the school building, how are they getting access to products? And so we would deliver care packages directly to people's doorsteps, so they didn't have to leave their homes because of the pandemic. And it's something that's not talked about enough. A lot of people assume that people can afford period products, but we don't make assumptions, and we make sure everyone has access to the products that they need, and safe products that are free of harsh chemicals and toxic chemicals that affect our reproductive health.
Yeah, both incredibly important points. There are some huge assumptions we make about either a person's or a family's ability to access, Representative Miranda, as you were mentioning, broadband, even having the devices to utilize broadband and internet, and the affordability around that. And Bria, as you're mentioning, again, huge assumptions that this is accessible to everyone, not being aware of the disparities that actually occur. And so bringing these voices, elevating that is always important, and spreading that awareness is incredibly important. So thank you for that. Let's see.
Deirdre, I actually see
yes.
someone has their hand up.
Excellent.
Hey.
Hi, this is Roxanne Reddington Wild, and I know a fair number of you, and Irving, of course, very well. Recently, Scotland, the country of Scotland, passed a law to make period products free for all women, all girls and women, which really surprised me because I used to live in Scotland when I got my master's, and that wasn't the Scotland that I knew at all. It's a really brave thing to do. Rep Miranda, would you consider filing a bill that I can then go to my own reps and senator and ask them to support to make period products free for girls and women here in Massachusetts?
One of the things that I've really appreciated about being a member of not only the Black and Latino caucus, but also the Women's Caucus, is that we have begun that process already by starting by looking at different communities, women in the carceral system, young women, older women in schools and public colleges and public spaces. And I actually think that that's the direction it needs to go. In Massachusetts, I'm well known for doing things like police reform and going straight to the goal. I'm trying to end life without parole. I'm going straight to the goal. But when it comes to actually passing law in a body that we assume is quite liberal, but is actually quite moderate and conservative, even though it's a Democratic supermajority, we must begin to start with the folks who we know need it the most first. And I think it's really doable if all the women and girls and those who are women facing and those that are our allies and accomplices join us in saying all school students should be able to get these products. And if these products are not in schools or we are not in school because of remote learning, then they should be provided at community centers, at other points of interest so that they can access them. And then looking at women that are incarcerated, we've done an incredibly poor job. Women who are in addiction or recovery, folks who are homeless or experiencing being unhoused. Massachusetts had the largest growth in homelessness in 2018 with over 17% growth. Who we think is homeless is not who is homeless, really. There's huge amounts of families that were never faced with what they're faced now with the erasure of a job, the loss of a loved one suddenly, and other crises in housing that are unhoused. And so I think if we start there, I'd be committed to thinking about how we actually handle marginalized, vulnerable people and then work on, that would be so great. I spend so much money on my products, and after last year, decided to go completely with honey pot products. That has changed my life, things that are not toxic, that are made by Black women for Black women. And I still pay a pretty penny. Not everyone is able to access that. I would love to make honey pot products available to everyone. And I just heard that the Department of Health is looking at new contracts to support Black and brown businesses. And if they're going to invest millions of dollars in these products, I'd love for them to do their due diligence by supporting businesses that care about this community. So I hope that's a long and short answer, but we're there, we're thinking of it.
Bria, did you have any thing that you'd like to add quickly?
Yes, I just want to make you all aware that there is a bill called the I Am Bill, an act to increase access to disposable menstrual products that was started by Mass Now. It's a great organization if you're not familiar with them. And that would hope, if it gets passed, it will allow access to menstrual products in prisons, homeless shelters, and public schools. And so we're going in the right direction, and we just definitely need your support. So if you go on Mass Now's website, you can definitely find more information about the I Am Bill and call your Congress, state legislator, and have them support it if they're not already.
Great.
We have a question for Bria, and it's from Mejia, and she says, Bria, have you experienced pushback within the work you do, and how did you navigate or address this?
Yes, I experience pushback every day. However, I am unapologetic, and I strongly believe in menstrual education, access to menstrual products, and mentorship for Black and brown girls and young women. And so sometimes people come for me stating, like, why are you talking about periods? That should be something discussed with the individual and their doctor, and not discussed openly. But a lot of women, Black women specifically, have suffered in silence for far too long. Black women are 2 to 3 more times likely to develop uterine fibroids. They're 7 times more likely to have a myomectomy, which is the removal of uterine fibroids. A lot of girls experience heavy bleeding and painful periods, and they think it's normal when in fact it's not. And so for far too long, we have been suffering in silence, Googling our way and misdiagnosing ourselves because we have no one to talk to. And so I just started the conversation. Irving was a big advocate for community conversations and having the community just share stories. And so I'm constantly encouraging people to share their period stories, because you never know what person needed to hear your story in order to help them heal and overcome their own reproductive health issues. And so although I do get some pushback from people, I'm steadfast in my beliefs, and I'll continue advocating for paid menstrual leave. Hopefully one day it's passed, because a lot of people have these debilitating chronic reproductive health issues and have to show up to work each and every day and suffer in pain, and they should not have to. They should be able to have that covered somehow, some way, or have an opportunity to work remotely. So sometimes I get pushback, but I would say 80% to 90% is support. People in the community really support. I'm constantly getting random messages from people just stating, like, what period products do you use, and just sharing their own stories. And so it's just so amazing. And I encourage you all to share your stories. Start at home. Start with your group of friends if you're not ready to talk about it publicly.
Thank you so much, Bria. That's great advice. So Representative Miranda, I have one final question for you. Bria did share how we could support her work. How can the community support you?
So each legislator just went through a pretty daunting period of writing bills, and I was happy to file 13 bills. Majority of them are in criminal justice reform, addressing issues we have in juvenile justice and parole. The second piece of my work has been a lot on maternal health, and there's a cadre of bills. One important bill is extending the postpartum care period in mass health post 60 days. I can't believe that we actually keep this coverage to 60 days while families actually need at least a year after having birth and going through birth. And so that is a bill that I'm working with Healthcare for All and Representative Mejia and Senator Feeney on to make sure that with many representatives to make sure that that happens, because we know, and Senator Lovely, we know that that care needs to happen. There's also a bill on a fetal infant mortality review, which sounds very scary, but we don't have the right data. We say we don't know what's happening because we actually are not collecting the right race data and the data. We don't know how many children and families are actually impacted, and it's important to know so we can fix this problem. And so we are trying to follow the federal government. Shout out to Rep. Underwood and all the representatives, including our own Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, that just launched the Momnibus bill that has over 12 different bills, all the way from how climate impacts the birthing journey, all the way to creating postpartum care. And what we know is if we work on the state level to mirror and align with the federal government, you can just Google my name, and what happens is that there's a state house website, mahouse.gov, and all the bills are there. What we need is to not be apologetic. Like Bria said, we have to use our voices. Everyone in the Commonwealth, you have a senator, you have a representative, you have a governor, you have a speaker of the House, you have a Senate president. They all get hired or voted in to work for you. They need to hear from you. They need to hear that these are the issues you want us to work on. Because if not, they think that they can continue to do government as government has been doing. And we can't do that anymore. Now we have 4 Black women, and I'm super excited because I guess we had 100% growth by adding Representative Brandy Fluker-Oakley that represents Mattapan and Milton. We're so happy to have her join me, Rep. Tyler, and Rep. Elugardo to make 4 Black women. But that's nearly not enough. We need you to talk to the representatives from Pittsfield all the way to P-Town, that Black women's issues are actually everybody's issues. And so that's how you can support me and the work that I'm trying to do on the behalf of the Commonwealth.
Well, thank you both. And I ask the audience to join me in thanking. There may be an emoji where you could at least hand clap or thumbs up to our unapologetic, powerful Black women panelists. Thank you so much for your insights, for bringing knowledge and power to this discussion. And I'll turn it over to Sharon.
Thank you, Georgia. And again, thank you so much to the wonderful speakers. Julia, Liz, Bria, you have just brought a tremendous amount to this day. It's hard not to be with one another. We usually have this celebration, we usually have music, we usually have,
Food.
Food, right, libations, everything. So it is tough to do this kind of event virtually, but you have made it so meaningful and so interesting and so heartfelt. So I want to again thank you for being here. Thank you for taking out time in your busy schedules to be here and share with us this Black History Month celebration. Thank you so much. The best thing we can do and could do to honor Irving's legacy is to continue the work. And at ABCD, we plan to do that each and every day. We look forward to doing that in the future. One of the things that we're thinking about is establishing a Community Health Leadership Academy in her name, because one of the things that one of the many things that Irving had done is to work with young people, particularly those of color, supporting them, mentoring them, growing leaders, providing leadership to them, but growing leaders not only in the area of community health, but also opening up doors and exposing them to many, many kinds of opportunities and to people in the community. So we hope you'll hear more about that in the future. The last thing I want to close with is thanking our committee. I know Carla already did this, but Carla Richards, who led our committee and the logistics, and many of you know how hard she works on this each and every year. So thank you, Carla. And then also, if other members of the committee can just wave their hands, you can get, I don't know who's on the call, but just wave your hands. Thank you, thank you. Every year we pull this together, sometimes in shorter time than others, but always with the same amount of love and passion and commitment to Black History Month and to Black history in general. So thank you again for attending. Keep up, everyone. Thank you for attending today's event. Keep up your engagement, keep up the fight. We have so much work to still do, as all of the speakers have said, and we hope to see you again at next year's event and in the streets, right? Have a good day.